Attack of the Clones is one of the more underappreciated movies of the Skywalker saga. It's awkward with romance, kind of clumsy with plot, and somewhat uninspiring with the dialogue. Still, I'd argue that it has the bones, at least, of the greatest movie of the whole franchise. Think about it. It's a political thriller with forbidden love, dangerous mystery, heartbreaking tragedy, revenge, fisticuffs, and it all culminates in full-scale war, the likes of which we'd never seen before. What's not to like? All in all, small parts of the execution make all the difference. George Lucas had a great film in mind, but oftentimes the movie-making process can muddy a great vision. Rather than be another armchair critic spouting, "they should have done this instead," and come up with a different story entirely, I'd like to just tweak the film we already have, like an editor giving notes. The purpose is to support, not to rewrite. Before we get underway, if you enjoy this conversation, leaving a like and subscribing would mean the world to me, and it'd go a long way towards supporting the channel and, me by extension. Now, with that out of the way, let's follow this saber dart. My first note is that nothing really changed under Palpatine after 10 years of him being in office. You can't really feel it. Lucas makes it a point to show the Jedi are still disillusioned by politics.
We do have a chance to talk a little bit about politics and the Jedi's disenchantment with the political process due to the corruption and the ineffectiveness of the Senate.
Let's instead have Anakin and Obi-Wan's dialogue reflect Palpatine's administration. Anakin is excited by his policies and progress, while Obi-Wan is cautious and jaded. Anakin says he thinks Palpatine is a good man in the film now, but why?
The Chancellor doesn't appear to be corrupt.
To support that, he can point out how the Chancellor has been reining in special interests and groups like the Trade Federation and making the blockade of Naboo impossible now. He's fixing things. Obi-Wan could then retort, politicians always serve themselves and not to be naive, and if you approve of their policies, it just means you're part of their plans. That's some good foreshadowing. Basically, just show the audience and let us know that Palpatine seems to actually be doing some good. Speaking of Anakin, he's pretty petulant in this movie. I think fans have retroactively turned this into a feature rather than a bug by reasoning that he was always supposed to be, an annoying teenager. But I haven't seen anything contemporary to the making of this film stating as much. Let's pull his attitude back a bit and give it some context so that everyone's happy. But we can keep his issues with his teacher. For instance, his being frustrated with being held back, as he says a couple of times.
I'm really ahead of him. He's holding me back!
We need to see him in action and actually agree with him when he says that Obi-Wan is too cautious with his training and may be holding him back. He should be the one getting results and doing things that Obi-Wan can't. Leaping out of the car is a good start, but Obi-Wan reacts like a parent watching their teen driving too fast. Sure, the implication is that Anakin does this sort of thing all the time, which is impressive, but it would be worthwhile to illustrate how he is constantly pushing the bounds of what is possible. Maybe we can let Obi-Wan be in awe of this feat. During the chase, Obi-Wan may struggle to keep obstacles out of their path, prompting Anakin to just say, "Forget it, I'll do it," and then do a better job while piloting the speeder. Along those lines, it's the little things that could speak volumes. Just picture Anakin being so powerful and comfortable with the Force that he plays with it. He fiddles with it absently, something that no other Jedi does. While other Jedi have to look at what they're manipulating with the Force, Anakin never does. Imagine him accidentally using a mind trick on somebody. He's that much of a natural. Other people and other Jedi need to be in awe of what Anakin can do. Master Windu or Master Yoda can remark on how some Jedi aren't comfortable being in Skywalker's presence for too long because standing next to him is like standing next to a raging fire. These edits and additions bring new context to Obi-Wan's uptightness. He's doing all he can to keep his cyclone of a student under control. Maybe he's scared of his own student and wishes Qui-Gon never put this on him, even though Anakin has always proven to be a good friend.
I realize now what you and Master Yoda knew from the beginning. The boy was too old to start his training.
On the political front, Jar Jar giving Palpatine emergency powers is frankly a little too simple. The politicking of the prequels was always cited as a glaring weakness, but political storylines, as with anything, are only bad when they're not done well. When they hit hard. I mean, look at Game of Thrones or House of Cards. Let's look to Padme here. She is a power player in the Senate. It's a big part of her personality and it has a lot of untapped potential. She should be shown to be an effective voice of reason in the Senate that slowed Palpatine's plans down. With her gone, the cautious Democratic coalition is weakened and fails to overcome the vote giving Palpatine emergency powers. Yes, a vote rather than an applause meter spurred by one substitute senator. The effects of her being gone from the Senate should really be felt. The current cut of the film shows her venting about not being there for the final vote on forming an army, but it doesn't really have lasting ramifications. Further, let's contrast her and Chancellor Palpatine. She left the rulership of Naboo behind even though the people wanted her to stay, while Palpatine has held on to his office. Obi-Wan mentions that he stayed past his term in Episode 3, but let's move it up to here. The authoritarian creep has already started. Perhaps they even delay the next election due to the separatist threat in this movie.
This idea of a democracy being given up, and in many cases being given up in a time of crisis. You see it throughout history, whether it's Julius Caesar or Napoleon or Adolf Hitler. You see these democracies under a lot of pressure, in a crisis situation, who end up giving up a lot of the freedoms they have and a lot of the checks and balances to somebody with a strong authority to help get them through the crisis. You know, it's not the first time a politician has created a war to try to stay in office.
We can further drive home the differences between her and the man who used to have her job by letting them actually have a conversation before things in the movie come to a head. She knows the Senate is leaning towards giving him great authority, and she can't do her part to stop it because she's not there, and so appeals to him to personally not accept it. She implores him to follow her example as a modest leader, one whose strength lies in finding consensus, but it's all for naught in the end. Palpatine tells her that he'll follow the will of the Senate, but she sees through his doublespeak and can tell he wants the power.
I love democracy.
Speaking of Padme, her romance with Anakin has always been rocky. I don't personally mind the idea that the Jedi are monks without personal attachments. I see it as a spin-on with great power comes great responsibility. With that said, I find it even more compelling for the two of them to recognize a potential romance would have personal, intimate consequences, yet do it anyway, and then choose to keep it a secret because they simply want something neither has ever truly had, a life all of their own, without having a rule set in stone that said they can't be together. Frankly, now their romance falls flat because we don't see what they provide for each other. Why would she quickly fall in love with this person she has not seen in 10 years? And how do we know he's not just obsessed with someone he knew when he was a kid? Let's actually show what each person does for the other. For instance, Anakin should be charming, make her laugh, and provide a safe space for her to be herself. Padme has been in the public eye, subject to all the pressure and scrutiny that comes with it, since she was at least 14. She does not know anybody who does not treat her like the queen or the senator. Anakin, though, he just knows her as Padme. He shows her how somebody born with immense power can live for themselves. And Padme should provide direction for Anakin without making him feel like he's being constrained. She has a natural strength that Kenobi does not, and is more suited to Anakin's personality. She does not see his power as a liability, but rather she recognizes that he needs outlets to test himself. He's not petulant or impatient. He's frustrated by being surrounded by people who don't understand him. Now, we mentioned Dooku before. Let's go back to him. Let's improve his history and motivation. Dooku's motivation, which was illustrated wonderfully in Tales of the Jedi, should be front and center. George Lucas had it in his mind back when he was developing Attack of the Clones. He just didn't hit it that hard.
He carries the sympathies of most of the Jedi, which is that the Senate is corrupt and it's incapable of carrying on any meaningful actions because they argue about everything all the time.
Dooku would be a compelling antagonist if he talked about the flaws of the Republic during his conversations with Kenobi. He could even say that the weakness of the Senate is what got Qui-Gon killed. Now, like I touched on before, the origin of the clone army is really suspicious. Let's look at this. The template for the Republic's Deus Ex Machina kind of army was an associate of the Separatist leader and fought for him and with him until he himself was killed. He happened to be outfitted with Kaminoan saber darts, so the people who made the army are giving this guy weapons to use against them. So you could reason that whoever erased it from the archives also helped Jango Fett find it. Incidentally, how were the Jedi supposed to eventually find it? Did Darth Sidious plan for Senator Amidala's assassin to be tracked to Kamino? I'd be surprised. Personally, I think the most terrifying implication for the Republic is that this one planet was able to outfit an entire army fit for a galactic war without anybody knowing. It's hard to tweak this plot point without changing Lucas's ideas entirely. A decent, albeit imperfect, remedy would be for someone to address the elephant in the room, Jango's employment with Count Dooku, but then make it clear that the Separatist threat is so great that they can't afford to look this gift horse in the mouth. Let their short-term salvation be a terrible anchor around the Jedi's neck that they know could sink them in the future. Another little note I have is maybe let Obi-Wan be the one to kill Jango Fett rather than Mace Windu. As cool as it is to see Mace in action, it would have been a nice close to that circle for Obi-Wan to actually be the one to do Jango Fett in. Yes, it would have been neat had Mace Windu suffered his demise at the hands of Boba Fett later on, because it was kind of set up in this movie now, but as it stands now, there's not a ton of reason for him to be Jango's executioner, unless, going off what we said about the shady origins of their new clone army, Yoda and Mace could decide earlier in the movie that Jango Fett needs to be captured or killed. Yoda could favor capture, Mace could favor kill, and he takes his shot when he sees him in the arena. In fact, that could filter later into Episode 3 and give Anakin more reason to suspect Mace Windu of being too quick to execute his enemies.
You are under arrest, my lord.
So this may seem like a lot of notes from somebody who thinks Attack of the Clones is just a stone's throw away from being the greatest movie of the saga, but it goes to show how important the details are. It's such a fine line between being the best and the worst. Now, I would ask you, what are some details from movies you changed to make them that much better? If you forgot to grab a free like and subscribe for protection, go ahead and do that now. I'd love to see you again. This and the previous video I made were both Star Wars, but this is not a Star Wars channel. I'm thinking of maybe dedicating a couple of videos per topic and then moving on. After all, this is a storytelling channel. I think the next one may be pulling from the Bond franchise, but if you have any suggestions of what you'd like to see, let me know. In the meantime, stay tough and stop by again sometime.